All right. Here we go. Let's do this. We're live. Sorry, it's 8 minutes delayed. I was really trying hard to get this done on time, and I was ready. I even came upstairs because my children are watching Trolls, even though it's 9:30 in the morning. They were very excited to watch the new Trolls movie, which was some kind of agreement that we came up with. Anyway, it happened. I think cleaning and schoolwork happened, and I think that's the deal we made anyway. I want to talk this morning about some of the psychology behind overwhelm and where God fits into it. One of the really interesting things about our brain is that we don't think about all the bits and pieces of our life all the time. It's too much. And so our brain just sort of creates simple meaning, simple kind of shortcuts for this does this. So when we look at our car, we don't see a collection of all the different pieces that make up that vehicle. We just see this gets me from here to there. This is how I get to work. This is how I buy my groceries. What your brain sees is the kind of derived meaning of your vehicle. Now, if something falls apart and your vehicle breaks down, then the derived meaning that your brain associates with your car also breaks down, and suddenly you see all the bits and pieces. So you see tires and brakes and an engine which is made up of thousands and thousands of pieces, and it feels scary because the meaning has been removed, and now it's like, I don't know how to fix my car. I don't know how all those bits and pieces work together. And then you can start to quickly feel overwhelmed and freaked out because it's too much, unless you happen to be an expert on cars, in which case you know all those bits and pieces anyway. So what's, I think, happening for many of us with COVID-19 is that the derived meaning that we have from life similarly gets revealed and or broken down into its component parts. And that's really scary, right? So we think, okay, I want a coffee. I can go out to a coffee shop. But during COVID-19, the coffee shop is closed. Why? Because it's safer for people to not be gathering so that we don't spread the virus more quickly. But if a coffee shop is closed, that means they're not making any profit. And if they're not making any profit, then they can't pay their staff. So maybe they need to lay off their staff. And so maybe if they've laid off their staff and they're not buying coffee, at least they don't have any costs, they're not making any money, but at least it's okay. But it's not okay because they still have to pay rent or their mortgage for the facility that they're in. Okay, well then maybe they can go to their lender and say, hey, can you give us some grace or so on. But maybe that property owner actually is also paying a mortgage on the property. And quickly, the whole world starts to snowball into all of its component parts that we don't normally see. You know, for many of you, I know some of you are at home teaching your children. I know some of you have been laid off. Some of you have not been laid off but are having to work from home. And so there's all of these bits and pieces that we take for granted that suddenly are revealed for all of their component parts. And the number of parts that the world is made up of are simply overwhelming if you start to think about each and every one of them. And that's part of the reason I think many of us are moved towards overwhelm. It's because our brain normally doesn't consider all the bits and pieces. It just considers the derived meaning and what we can do with those things. So, what do? First of all, understand that the derived meaning that you have for everything in your life may be a little bit different to everybody else's, and so you may be experiencing this differently than everybody else, and that's okay. You're allowed to receive this as exactly as overwhelming as it is for you, exactly as fearful as it is for you. That's okay. There's no judgment. There's no right way to be processing this. There's no God's not looking at you and going, well, you are not processing this as well as Susan, so poo-poo to you. Everybody's at a different space, and that's okay. Second, understand that overwhelm is something that happens in your body. And so you can work with your body. I swear I changed my phone hand, so that I could put my hand on my chest. Put your hand on your chest and you can start to be at peace. You can start to breathe. You can start to work with your body to bring itself back into a place where you're not so overwhelmed, where you can tolerate things. One of the beautiful promises from Scripture is that we shouldn't worry about tomorrow because today has enough problems of its own. And I know a lot of people consider that really just in terms of don't worry about tomorrow. It's also kind of funny. There's a promise in there that today's going to have problems. And today does have problems of its own. But you got to kind of return to the moment and start here and say, okay, this is my body. This is me. Now, if your body is sick, you may also be considering how all the component parts of your body, the derived meaning of your body may be breaking down. And that's really scary. So you start with your breathing. Your oxygen is life. So you start with one simple system. As you breathe in, you can remind yourself that no matter how complex the world is, or isn't, it's actually always been this way. It's always been this way. The complexity of your body has always been this way. And you've always been breathing. And you've survived this far. So you're going to be okay. When you start to feel a bit of peace come back to your own body and your own mind, and you can start to consider that this fragile, complex world that is so interdependent on other pieces and other people has actually always been this way. It's always been this complex. It's always been this interdependent. It's always been this fragile. And it works. It's scary right now because that fragility and interdependence and complexity has been revealed to us. And we don't normally see it for what it is. But it's actually always been that way. And it's worked. It will work again. It will be okay again. And God has been involved with this whole world and all of these systems, and always has been, and has held it all together. So it's going to be okay. Yesterday, I was contemplating working on a project in my kitchen. I got a new oven over the weekend, one of those awkward Facebook Marketplace deals in social isolation where the thing is left on the porch and you go and have a look at it, and then you shout up to them at the balcony window and you send them an email money transfer, and then you put the thing in your car. And but I realized yesterday, as I was working to install it in my kitchen, there was a number of complexities that I hadn't realized. The size of the machine, the electricity requirements of the machine. I'm going to need an electrician at some point. I don't know how I get an electrician in while we're social isolating. I have to expand a cabinet in order to fit this thing in. And suddenly what seemed like simple solution to a problem, the derived meaning broke down. The meaning was I get to bake things. But all of a sudden I began to see the complexity, and I had to start learning all these bits and pieces, learning about electricity, learning about how I'm going to solve this problem, learning the solutions to the problem, and it felt very, very overwhelming. Just because really I don't understand those things, but I had to learn them. But by the end of the morning, I had learned them, I had figured out all my options, and I had chosen a path forward. And I had returned meaning to these things because I had learned and I had understood and I had made a path forward. And so it's the same for you and I. We can learn, we can apply meaning back to this complexity, and we can simplify it in our minds. And we can have peace that God has always been here, that God has always been talking to us, that God has always been involved in our economy, in our international trade, in our systems of government, and it will return to the simplicity of derived meaning once again. And you're allowed to feel a little overwhelmed, and you're allowed to take responsibility for your body and your mind and return yourself to a place of peace. So there you go. Grace and peace to you, my friends. Love to see you all. I will talk again soon.